Shalom friends, welcome to video 8, dealing with sacred time. We now share some more details about how Abba's calendar works, and we believe you will see that his magnificent timepiece is incredibly awesome, and even miraculous to say the least, and yes, it would be expected to also be perfect in every way, and it is. Did you know that Abba's calendar is so precise that we can truly know the exact timing for every single day that has already been lived out in history? Did you also know that with Abba's calendar, we can calculate for precisely when every single day will occur that is still in our future, just by knowing what the full moon schedule is for every year? The second and third witnesses to help us in figuring out the calendar timing is when the spring equinox will land on a seventh-day Sabbath, and then the following fall equinox will land on the blowing of trumpets. This is true, as you will see shortly. I will start out explaining how the intercalation works, and we will continue to repeat concepts from different angles, since we learn by repetition. Now here's our intercalation chart, and our first column here is the Gregorian year, and then we have the full moon date here for every single year. And what we've done is, since this is the month of the spring equinox, we've just simply put all of the full moon dates in there. And what happens is every 3 or 5 years without fail, and that goes clear back into eternity past, which is only about 6,000 years, and going on into our future, every year at the time of the spring equinox, the full moon shows up every 3 or 5 years. Now this is not in a pattern that I can figure out anyway that is consistent. It always is different. It could be 2 5s together, 2 3s together, but I can't seem to get a pattern that goes consistently for forever. It always changes. Now what we have here is, this is little red check marks. These are the years that we actually intercalate or run 7 days off Abba's clock in order to keep it in sync with the 4 seasons. Right here we have special 7-year cycles, which have bookend intercalation years. And then in the very middle, it's a special year. These years here, the full moon and the equinox and the first day of the year will all be on that fourth day Wednesday. Now what we have on all of these years with the check marks is we have the full moon date. That will show up sometime during this intercalation week. And so let me just run that down. March 19th for 2011, it's in the middle of those 7 intercalated days. In 2016, it was March 23rd, out here on the end. In 2019, this is not an intercalation year, but it was exactly started the first day of the year on March 20th, and that was also the spring equinox day. In the one coming up in 2022, the full moon will be on the 18th of the month. That'll be towards the front of the week, beginning of the week. So what else we also have to have is, during that week, the equinox, spring equinox, always has to occur, and it has to be in the middle of that week. The equinox cannot be out on the outer edges, or you've got the wrong year. That would be probably a special 8-year cycle if that ever shows up. It'll be in the 2070s, so most of us, many of us won't be here when the next 8-year cycle occurs. But anyway, the spring equinox is in the middle of that 7 days, and this column here shows us that we are never more than 4 days off of the spring equinox, and so that has to be in the middle of the week. go 3 or 4 days each way, and so it has to be centered. That scripture from Enoch 73 says, the full moon brings in all the years so that it does not go too far forwards or too far backwards from the spring equinox. So that has to be centered. Now this column right here, we have the leap years. These are Abba's leap years, the LY. And that is every 3 or 5 years according to the full moon. The full moon determines our leap years, and it also determines our intercalation years. Now the G is for the Gregorian leap years, which are every 4 years. Now what we also have for leap years with Abba's calendar is on special 8-year cycles. There is no intercalation in that middle 3 or 5 year, whichever one it is. And that matches the Gregorian numerically wise for when it does not add a leap day, a leap year on the century marks, unless that century mark is also divisible by 4, and then they also make that a leap year. And so I think it's probably averages out to about 70, 80 years, somewhere in there. And anyway, the Gregorian and Abba's calendar have the exact same number of leap years in that 360-year chart that we figured out. And so it is accurate. And we believe Abba's years are on the full moons, just because Enoch tells us the full moon brings in all the years so that it does not go too far forwards or backwards. And so the full moons are used both for leap years, which aren't in Scripture, by the way. That is just his special years that he runs those 48-hour days on the spring and fall equinoxes. And I believe we can verify that this particular spring it appeared that March 19th and March 20th was a 48-hour cycle of the sun, that it didn't change its mounts. It was so, it was just not even a hair difference from one day to the next, and that's not normal. Now on leap years, the fall equinox will also be a 48-hour day. We believe that'll happen on the intercalary day and the Feast of Trumpets, the blowing of trumpets. And we can verify that. I'll give you that date. I forget what it is. September 17th and 18th maybe. That sounds about right. But we should see that the sun does not, he repeats, in other words, he repeats that same orbit for 48 hours. And since Abba tells us that the sun only has 364 mounts every year, on a 365-day year, we have to have it repeating somewhere. And it appears it does it every spring. And then on 366-day years, we have to have a second one spinning on its horse, if you will, for another 24 hours. And like I say, we can verify that with sundials and with another technique that I'm wanting to introduce when I get a chance in another video. So what we have here is basically showing how many days accrue. 366-day years, we got 2 days accruing. 365-day years every year is at least a 365. We have 1 day accruing. Now these are the 7 days that add up then. All these days accrued, we got to run them back off the clock because Abba only has a 364-day clock. He likes to have everything in exactly the same every year on his calendar. So he makes it a perfect 52 weeks and a perfect 13 weeks for each season, which is 91 days. There's always an intercalary day in between each of the 4 seasons, but the intercalary days lead each season, so that's why in the spring we have day 364 actually leading day 1 into the new year. According to Enoch, the full moon is the luminary sign that brings in all the years exactly, and she does so in 3-year, 5-year, and 8-year patterns. That never fails. She is our witness for when to change the years to keeping a 364-day annual cycle, which keeps Abba's calendar perfect. You will never be off by even one day if you correctly follow Abba's luminaries, which are made for signs and seasons, days and years. The full moon schedule keeps every year perfect so that the start of every year does not go too far forward or too far backward of the spring equinox. This is a miraculous cycle that can only be explained by intelligent design. We see that by using the full moon witness, we will usually start our years on the closest fourth day Wednesday to the spring equinox. Now, Abba is extremely smart, and he's good at math. This system he has given to us for intercalation is mathematically impossible to improve upon. The 4 seasons will always be in sync with the 4 intercalary days, as closely as can be with the intercalation cycle that Abba has devised. We will always intercalate 7 days from a 4th day Wednesday to a 4th day Wednesday, and that's every 5, 6, or rarely 8 years, according to that perfect full moon schedule. There are not any other possibilities that work as proven by our Enoch 73:13 scripture. So we are never going to be more than 4 days away from the actual spring equinox for the start of any year in history. And we are usually closer or exactly on the equinox for that start. Just to review our scripture, it's Enoch 73:13. And I've added full moon because a couple verses prior to this, it says that the moon rises as the sun sets. This is always a full moon. So I've taken the liberty to put full moon here, and that agrees with the Dead Sea Scrolls, by the way. And so I've also added into the verse from the spring equinox, because that is the only thing it could be talking about. Too far forwards or too far backwards. It is the spring, and it brings in all the years. And the years do start on the spring equinox. So I've taken the liberty to share that that is also the spring equinox. Enoch 73:13. The full moon brings in all the years, exactly, that their stations may come neither too forwards nor too backwards a single day from the spring equinox, but that the years may be changed with correct precision in 364 days. In 3 years, the days are 1,092. In 5 years, they are 1,820. And in 8 years, 2,912 days. Now, this wheel represents 1 year with 4 seasons, and the 6 gates where the sun will be for each month of the entire year. He is in each gate twice each year for 30 days each time. This horizontal line here represents the 2 solstices. Here we've got the winter one and the summer solstice. And this vertical line are the 2 equinoxes. You have the spring equinox up here that brings in all the years, month 1, coming from month 12. And down here you've got the fall equinox in between months 6 and 7. Notice that when one season gets out of sync with the calendar, then all 4 seasons get out of sync with the calendar. I'll just demonstrate that here. Wherever we start the spring equinox up here at the top, it affects the other seasons. And so with Abba's calendar, we never go more than 4 days away from that intercalary day, that spring equinox. Now I will demonstrate shortly how these 2 equinoxes play tag with one another, and the full moon is always the referee at the time of the spring equinox. The fall equinox will be off timing by 7 days down here when it's time to intercalate, but the spring equinox will be a maximum of 3 or 4 days off. They are not perfectly in sync when you look at a calendar, but Abba designed it this way for a reason. These other 3 seasons will be further out of sync than will the spring equinox. We're supposed to guard the month of the Aviv. We're not supposed to worry about the fall equinox. We keep this one perfectly balanced, and the whole calendar works perfectly, as you will see. So when it's time to intercalate the clock will have wound down so the years are starting 3 days or 4 days at the max before spring equinox occurs, and about 7 days down here before the fall equinox occurs. Now when we reset, the spring equinox will be starting several days after the equinox occurs. And the following fall equinox will land on trumpets. The equinoxes were designed this way so that on Abba's 364-day calendar, so truly the two equinoxes will play tag with each other and the full moon will be the referee. Here's the many signs we know to look for in finding the correct year to intercalate. The first sign, we will already know the only optional years for intercalation will be when the full moon shows up in the spring to bring in all the years. And she will be following a pattern of every 3 or 5 years without fail. That goes into eternity and forever into the past. It's always there every 3 or 5 years without fail. And she will show up at the spring equinox very faithfully. So if a particular year is not mathematically possible to have a 3 or a 5 year schedule since her last appearance, then we know we have the wrong year. And I'm going to be updating a new chart that will show this amazing 3 or 5 year pattern for several hundred years when I get the time. Now the second sign, in the fall before an intercalation year occurs, that high Sabbath day of trumpets, day 183, will occur 1 week before the spring equinox occurs, or it'll be within 1 day. There's always 1 day grace. Now this will be a 4th day of the week on a Wednesday when trumpets occurs. It'll occur right here 7 days before. That gives you your sign that you need to intercalate the following year. So let me just set that up right here. We're starting right there. That's when we need to intercalate. Now right before this day 183 in the fall is the intercalary day 182. That'll be a 3rd day Tuesday of the week. And this is the fall gate intercalary day. Now we believe this will be the first day of the sun's 48-hour orbit every leap year. But we still need to confirm this. And from our research, we're already confident, and we're leaning towards every day 364 in the spring is always a 48-hour orbit of the sun. In other words, the 365 days are every year. And so we believe every year is brought in with a 365-day leap year, which the day 364 and day 1 of the new year are actually a 48-hour day, but every day is reckoned as 24 hours. And I don't know if we're supposed to necessarily know that. So the sun will do 364 orbits. He uses all 364 mounts every year. But Abba says every year must be reckoned in 364 days. But he also says that the sun uses those 364 mounts every year. And so for a 365-day year, he has to go a double spin on one, and then for leap years, he has to do another double spin on another one of those mounts. And so he says the sun only uses 364 every year. So we can do the math, and we know that there are 365 and 366 day years in actuality. Now here I'm just showing on month 1 when that intercalary day and the first day of the year would be that 48-hour orbit of the sun. It's day 364 from the last year, but we also know that the intercalary days lead each season. So day 364 and day 1 should be a 48-hour day every single year. Then in the fall, it should happen again on leap years, which are every 3 or 5 years. And so we believe that it is intercalary, it's the fall intercalary day, which is day 182, and then 183 would be the blowing of trumpets. Now the third sign, as a foregone conclusion, the following spring equinox will need to have a full moon occurring during that projected 7 days that are to be intercalated. If there is no full moon, that means there is no intercalation possible. The fourth sign, so if the full moon will show up during the intercalation week, then the spring equinox must occur during that 7 intercalated days, and that must land in the middle of the week, either on the 7th day Sabbath or on the first day of the week. This is the proof that the full moon is bringing in all the years, so that each year does not start too forward or too backward of the spring equinox, because that spring equinox will be right in the middle of that week. She's not too far forwards or too far backwards during that intercalated week. The fifth sign, so with the spring equinox landing in the middle of the intercalated week, we are assured that the start of the new year will never be more than 4 days away from the spring equinox. The sixth sign, we will always intercalate from a 4th day Wednesday to a 4th day Wednesday. The seventh sign, then after intercalation happens in the spring, that following fall equinox will land on the high Sabbath Feast of Trumpets. The seventh sign, then after intercalation happens in the spring, the following fall equinox will land on the high Sabbath day of blowing the trumpets, or within 1 day, which will also be on a 4th day Wednesday. The number 4 means door or gate. So now we have 4 doors and a full moon witness. The 2 equinoxes will play tag, and the full moon is the referee on every intercalation year. We go from a 4th day here. That just shows that we need to intercalate in the following spring. It's gone 7 days out of sync with nature. So in the spring we go from a 4th day here, and we intercalate. We run 7 days off the clock. In the middle of that week, the Sabbath, the 7th day Sabbath, will land on the equinox. It's in the center, so it doesn't go too far forwards or too far backwards. And then we intercalate all the way to that next 4th day Wednesday. And so that's where we start our year. It'll be started after the equinox then, and then each year we'll tick back down. And if you just think of this as a big timer, like an old wind-up timer for baking bread or cookies or whatever, it just winds down, and then you reset it, you rewind it. But we have that 4th day in the fall. It's 1 week before the equinox occurs. So the year before we intercalate, the Day of Trumpets will be 7 days sooner than the equinox itself. So that's a 4th day. That following spring, it triggers another 4th day where we run it off 7 days from 4th day to 4th day. Then, that following fall of this year that we intercalate, our Day of Trumpets, our high Sabbath, will actually land on the equinox. So it's like four different 4s. It'll go from 4 to 4 to 4th day to 4th day. It'll go from Sabbath to Sabbath. Sabbath in the very middle of the week on the equinox. Sabbath on the blowing of trumpets in the fall then. This will be a 48-hour day here, and this will be a 48-hour day here on all intercalation years. Every year we believe has a 48-hour day here. Only every 3 or 5 years is there a 48-hour day there. And we know that every year has exactly 365 or exactly 366 days in it. So let's just start with our last cycle, which was in 2016, the last time we intercalated. Now we will be intercalating again in the year 2022. So let's just show what happens every year as we accrue those extra days. Now 2016 was the last time, so we're starting out on our new cycle. We know that we will go at least 5 years before our next intercalation is necessary. And we can go 6 years or rarely 8 years as well. So 2016, that following fall, we had another day accrue because that was a 366-day year. So we bump our timer by 1 day. Now 2017, it was a 365-day year, so we bump it 1 day. 2018, same thing, 365 days, so we just bump it 1 day. Now 2019 is a special year. That is a year that we don't intercalate, but it is still one of Yah's leap years every 3 or 5 years. So we bump it 1 extra day. It accrued 2 days that year. So then we go to 2020, 1 more day. 2021, 1 more day. Well, 2022 is the year we intercalate. So that'll be triggered here in the fall. And that'll say that, okay, this next spring, we need to intercalate. Is it going to be a full moon year? Yes, it is. It sure is. It's every 3 or 5 years. We know that it was 3 years to here. It's 3 more years to here. So that triggers us to 4th day of the week. It's going to be a 4th day up here that we start intercalating. We run those days off the clock. The 7th day Sabbath will be in the middle of that week on the spring equinox. And then we continue to intercalate our 7 days. We're having our 81st Psalm full moon festival where these days are not counted, they're just run off the clock and lived out, and the Sabbath is kept like normal. And so then we get to our intercalation, and then that following year, that fall, 6 months later, that high Sabbath on 7/1 will be the Day of Trumpets. It'll be on that fall equinox. These are just a bunch of signs that confirm we've got the right year for intercalating. We can't go wrong if we follow this particular pattern. It's mathematically impossible to get any better than this. Every year basically starts on the closest 4th day Wednesday to the equinox. That is a good rule of thumb. If we ever get off, we just figure out, okay, where's the closest 4th day Wednesday to the start of the year? If you start on that year, or start your calendar at that particular time, you almost can't go wrong. The only time it might be a little bit different is this Wednesday might be 1 day closer or farther away than this Wednesday when the full moon showed up. So you might be off by 1 day some years. But for the most part, that is a very good rule of thumb. So we've got all these signs to help us make sure that we intercalate properly, as this is vital to ensuring that we are keeping the same days sacred and set apart down here on earth, that everyone in heaven, including Abba and Yeshua, is keeping sacred up there. Yehovah's calendar is truly set apart and has really only been created for that remnant who belong to Abba, because it will only be kept sacred by those who are set apart to Abba. It has just enough signs that need to be observed in order to keep it on track, which will not be followed properly by most people. But we need to know that even Abba keeps his own calendar in heaven. Abba has shown us in his word that his calendar is actually written on heavenly tablets and is a top priority to him. Here is Abba sharing his heart about his calendar, and verse 30 lets us know that he has engraved his calendar on stone tablets, just like he engraved the eternal 10 Commandments in stone, to show they will never be done away with. And then verse 31 lets us know his calendar is in fact forever. These verses from Jubilees and Genesis give us many clues to how Abba's calendar works and the purposes of the luminaries. Here's Jubilees 6, starting in verse 30. And all the days of the commandment will be 52 weeks of days, and these will make the entire year complete. Thus it is engraved and ordained on the heavenly tablets. and there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year or from year to year. And command ye the children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days. And these will constitute a complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts, for everything will fall out in them according to their testimony. And they will not leave out any day, nor disturb any feast. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order. And they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new months and seasons and Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. For I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto you, and it is not of my own devising, for the book is written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of the days is ordained, lest they forget the feasts of the covenant, and walk according to the feasts of the Gentiles, after their error and after their ignorance. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons, and comes in from year to year, 10 days too soon. For this reason, the years will come upon them, when they will disturb the order, and make an abominable day the day of testimony, and an unclean day a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the kadosh or the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the kadosh. For they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths and feasts and jubilees. For this reason I command and testify to you, that you may testify to them. For after your death your children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the new months and seasons and Sabbaths and festivals. And they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh. Now, one very good point I will make here is this calendar was re-shown to Moses well over 1,000 years after it was given to Enoch. And the 364-day calendar was still perfect then. There is no evidence in history that the luminaries have ever gone crazy since the time of Moses, which proves that the luminaries going haywire is still in our future, and the luminaries will be used to punish the wicked. Genesis 1:14. And Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." So let's just do a summary of the goals of Yah's 364-day calendar from those two scriptures we've just read, from Jubilees 6 and from Genesis 1. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. So here's summary number 1. The luminaries, which are the sun, moon, and stars, are used to separate the day from the night. Number 2, the luminaries are to be used for signs. Number 3, these same luminaries must also keep the 4 seasons synchronized with the 2 equinoxes and the 2 solstices. Number 4, Yah's calendar must accurately keep track of days and years and jubilees. Number 5, the sun was made to rule the day, and the moon and stars were made to rule the night, and all of them give light upon the earth. Number 6, the year must be 52 weeks long to make a year complete, and divided into 4 equal seasons of 91 days each. Number 7. Yah's calendar must also do perfect justice in 364 days every year. Number 8. It has to keep the correct timing for 12 new months of 30 days each. These new months are the sun's months, not the moon's months. The moon has her annual 12 cycles and 354 days, 10 days too soon over the sun's 364 days. Abba says every year is 364, not 354. Number 9. The Sabbaths must be kept every 7th day, 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. There can never be a break in that. You can't go 3 or 4 or 5 days and then make it your Sabbath then and then start over again. That just doesn't cut it. Abba says every Sabbath in eternity is every 7th day. Number 10. The true calendar must keep the annual feasts and the festivals on the correct days. It can't be keeping them on profane days or on Gentiles' days. They must be on Abba's days. If we ever intercalate wrong, we're not keeping Abba's feasts. We are off. Number 11. On Abba's calendar, we cannot make an unclean day set apart or a set apart day unclean. If we intercalate wrong, that is exactly what we are guilty of doing. Number 12. Yah's correct calendar must not make observations of the moon for determining the 12 months. The sun's months of 30 days each are to be used, and not the moon's months, which vary from 29 to 30 days each. Number 13. We must not disturb the 4 seasons by intercalating on the wrong years or adding lengthy intercalations like 30 days at a time, like moon calendars do. Number 14. We must know the purpose of the 4 intercalary days and when to intercalate and when to celebrate. Number 14. We must know the purpose of the 4 intercalary days and when to celebrate each one. Abba's fixed calendar can be easily memorized and does not ever change. The only things that must be changed from year to year are the pagan Gregorian dates, so we can do business with all the people who don't follow Yah's calendar. This calendar can truly be written in stone and used every year unto eternity. Abba wanted us to teach creation and cosmology along with his calendar in order to give his people Israel a much richer and deeper faith in his word, and to dispel the lies that the earth is a spinning speck of a globe lost somewhere in an ever-expanding universe, and that Abba is trillions of miles away. If you don't realize you are Israel, we will be showing you from Scripture that unless you are, you won't be invited into the kingdom. Every believer must be grafted into that 12 tribes. That's the only inheritance that up in heaven is for the 12 tribes. Abba is so close to us that perspective-wise we all look about the size of grasshoppers to him. He sees the entire earth all at once from where he is in heaven. He doesn't have to spin a globe so he can see everyone. He's got all of us in view 24 hours a day. The earth has been drawn as a circle, and Abba stretched out a beautiful blue firmament tent over the top of it, which he says is held up by very powerful winds. Then on day 4 of creation, he put wheels with luminary light bulbs on them to spin over the top of this circle of an earth. This is not at all hard to picture, and empirical evidence proves his word is true by the time-elapsed photos of the star trails at night, which confirm Abba's word. There is absolute proof that both the Earth and the North Star Polaris stay in exactly the same places. The Earth, which is on pillars, and a foundation which cannot be moved, and Polaris, which is at the center of heaven, being the hub of a giant spinning wheel. Now we have a poster of 12 cycles, but we have found a couple more to make 14. So the following clocks or cycles all started during the first week of creation, and each one is still keeping perfect time to this very day. And Yah promises that they will all continue to do so until eternity starts. Here's our scripture for that. Enoch 72 verse 1. The book of the courses of the luminaries of the heaven, the relations of each according to their classes, their dominion and their seasons, according to their names and places of origin, and according to their months, which Uriel, the set-apart messenger who was with me, who is their guide, showed me. And he showed me all their calculations exactly as they are, and how it is with regard to all the years of the world and to eternity, until the new creation is accomplished, which endures until eternity. So that last line there, all the years of the world and to eternity, until the new creation is accomplished, everything is going to endure. All of these cycles are going to remain perfect until the day when they go haywire to punish the wicked. So this verse describes that all the luminaries, which are the sun, the moon, and the stars, all have their own courses and their own respective months and seasons. Enoch states that all the luminary cycles will endure until eternity starts. The first one is the 7-day week cycle, right here up here in the upper left-hand corner. That started on day 1 of creation week. This perfect 7-day cycle of 6 days of work and 1 day of rest has remained uninterrupted since day 1. Notice that each day is 24 hours long before it changes to the next day. The date of the month and the day of the week do not change until each night is also completed. In other words, it doesn't go from January 3rd to January 4th until the night is also completed. And it doesn't change from, say, first day of the week to the second day of the week until both the day and the night are completed. Has the Sabbath somehow gotten off track? We know that Yeshua kept the correct Sabbath, or he would have been in sin, and therefore he could not have been the Messiah. So we know that he was keeping the same weekly Sabbath that the Jews were keeping. Those Jews who survived the Roman wars got dispersed all over the world in 70 A.D. What are the odds that every Jewish community on earth, which had not kept in communication with all the other Jewish communities, would still all keep the exact same seventh-day Sabbaths yet today? We can be very confident the Sabbath has not changed since 70 A.D. Some will say it got changed when the Gregorian calendar was adjusted. No, the days of the week were not changed when 11 days were intercalated in the year 1582. What had happened is the Julian calendar used a 325.25 day calendar, and so it was gaining time every year over the actual 365.2422, which we also know is a fake number. But the Julian used a leap year and added 1 day in February every 4 years. So by the time that Pope Gregory adjusted the calendar had gained 11 days. So how the Gregorian adjusted the Julian and made it into the Gregorian calendar was he simply adjusted the surplus time of 11 days from being Thursday, October 4th to Friday, the 15th of October in the year 1582. They didn't change the day of the week, they just changed the numbers. He also devised a variation that adds leap days in years divisible by 4, unless the year is also divisible by 100, which is all the century marks. But if the century year is also divisible by 400, a leap day is still added regardless. So his system is fairly accurate, but it is still off. As a result, in the years since Gregory introduced his calendar in 1582, a discrepancy of several hours has arisen. By the year 4909, the Gregorian calendar will be a full day ahead of the solar year. We, however, actually know that every year is either exactly 365 days or exactly 366 days. So at some point the Gregorian will simply need to adjust its calendar by another full day. Partial days are bogus and never have existed. Every day unto eternity is precisely 24 hours. 364.24322 days is a completely bogus, non-existent number. Now we go to our second chart up here, second from the left. It's actually a 24-hour clock. And each one of those days from that week has a 24-hour period. Day always starts at 6 o'clock in the morning and ends the next dawn when the evening ends. The night always follows the day in a 24-hour work-rest cycle. For 6 days we have 12 hours of work, each followed by a night with 12 hours of rest. This 24-hour cycle has nothing to do with whether it's still light or if it has become dark. There are always exactly 12 hours in every day, as Yeshua said in John 11:9. Yeshua answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? There are also exactly 12 hours every night, which always consists of 4 watches, 3 hours each. Each watch is 3 hours long. The Sabbath ends each week with a 24-hour rest cycle. 12 hours of rest followed by 12 hours of rest." As far as the question of when a 24-hour day begins, both Scripture and common sense reveal that the day begins at dawn when your day also begins. And the work part of the day ends in the evening, and it's time to rest. And you get to rest all the way until the next morning. Check out the dozens of scriptures on our Yah's Enoch calendar Facebook page article entitled, "When Does a Day Start?" in the announcements section. The Genesis account shows that Yah created at the beginning of each day, then he rested in the evening, and the next day started at dawn the next day, at which time Abba again did his work again during the daytime, and rested the following night. A couple of real straightforward, simple examples are, one is in Exodus 10, verse 13. "So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and Yehovah brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. When it was morning, the east wind had brought the locusts." Here's another example. Exodus 32, verse 5. "When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, 'Tomorrow shall be a feast to Yehovah.' And they rose up early the next morning and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings." This just simply shows that tomorrow began when they rose up early the next day. It didn't begin in the evening, as many teach. Number 3 is a Jubilee cycle. There are 120 Jubilees, we believe, just from a verse that hints at it in Scripture. But this is what our studies have shown, and so you will need to test it to see if we are rightly dividing the word of truth. But Yah said we would know the correct Jubilee cycle if we followed his calendar. And we will be doing a video in the future addressing this topic, and you may get more information in our calendar PDF on our pinned post at Yah's Enoch calendar on pages 20 through 22. But we believe that Yah has established 120 Jubilees for this current heaven and earth cycle. If the books of 2nd Esdras and the book of Jubilees can be trusted, then this appears to be the likely Jubilee cycle. More on this topic at another time. Cycle number 4 over here in the right hand top corner, the 49-year Jubilee clock. Each 49-year Jubilee is made up of 7 Shemitah cycles. 7 times 7 equals 49. If we are in the last Jubilee, then we could be in the year 5868 with 12 years left, and the next Shemitah would be in the year 2023. Now, I will discuss that another time. It could definitely be wrong. It's just an idea that Scripture seems to point that way, and we aren't adamant about it at all. We just share it. Now, cycle number 5 is in here in the middle on the left. There's 364 days in this particular clock. There's 12 months of 30 days each with 4 separate intercalary days. So we've got four separate 30-day cycles, and then we count one of those intercalary days with each one of those to make 91 each. Times 4 would equal the 364. Now the cycle number 6, these are just 30 days per month cycle, which was also started at creation. And over here, number 7, we have 12 months per year clock. And over here we have 52 weeks per year clock. It's 13 weeks. Whereas this is only 360 days. This one is 364 days because it includes the 4 intercalary days in those 52 weeks. Now here we have the 4 intercalary days that are in a separate cycle by itself. There's 360 days in the months, and then there's the 4 intercalary days. We do have the 4 season cycle. We have starting in the spring, the summer, the fall, the winter. Here we have the 91 days per season cycle. We always have 3 months of 30 days each, plus that 1 intercalary day. So there's 91 days in a cycle. Now over here we have a little meter that counts out every full moon. It's every 3 years or 5 years or 8 years for intercalation, but it's every 3 years or 5 years for leap year purposes. Now in the next video we will share about the 24-hour Sabbath and the 18 parts of Enoch's days being compared to 24 hours, and why mathematically using the 18 parts keeps all the numbers in whole numbers that are easy to use and memorize. But indeed, 18 parts is still equal to 24 hours, as we will show you. Now this may be our last video for a while, as I will shortly begin training for a new job that will take me away from home. But I may have time for one more video, so we'll just play that by ear. Now certainly in the future we will plan on doing more videos when we get the time. We're not finished yet with the calendar series, but it will be several months before we can resume, very likely. And then we will try to get one video out per month if possible. So until then, we do bid you Abba, Shalom, and blessings. Until next time.